We are going to now bring in Michael Tyler, Communications Director for the Harris-Walz campaign. He joins us now from the Ellipse. And Michael, thank you so much for being here. Talk about that just a little bit, because the place where Vice President Harris is speaking has so much resonance, and there are so many negative memories that come from there because of 2021. Donald Trump made it iconic, sort of anti-iconic, in a really frightening way, because we all watched what happened when he was at the Ellipse. Talk about the balance of being there, using that moment to try to erase or at least reduce the strength of that memory and replace it with something better and something more forward-leaning, and also talking about what happened in 2021 in that space.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Listen, you all were talking about this earlier this evening, right? We all remember the harm that happened on the day of January 6th. Tonight, you're going to see something very, very different. You have over 75,000 people who are gathered on this very same spot, who are gathered here because they understand that in Kamala Harris, you have somebody who's providing Americans with an opportunity to fundamentally turn the page. Entire Donald Trump era of politics, one that has been defined by hatred, by division, by violence, by harm, not just on January 6th, but the harm that Donald Trump caused throughout his entire presidency, whether it was banning abortion by overturning Roe v. Wade or cutting taxes for the rich at the expense of middle class and working families, everything he did throughout his presidency. But she's going to spend most of her time tonight laying out her vision for where she wants to take this country, representing a new generation of leadership, speaking to the American people about what she wants to do to lower costs, for example, to restore women's reproductive rights, to offer common sense solutions for the things that the American people are actually clamoring for. On January 20th, one of two people is going to be sitting in this building behind us. It's either going to be Donald Trump with his enemies list, Vice President Kamala Harris as President of the United States walking into the Oval Office every single day with her to-do list for the American people. That's what she's going to talk about tonight. It's what the undecided voters are wanting to hear and what she's going to deliver tonight and carry to the battleground states for the remainder of this campaign.
Let's talk about the situation of undecided voters. I mean, Donald Trump today had to explain that he is not a Nazi. When you are having to assert that you're not a Nazi, you're probably already losing the argument regarding that. He did what, you really could call a pretty straight-ahead send-up of a 1939 Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden in which Puerto Rico was called a pile of garbage. He's now having to do cleanup on aisle 5 for that. 1 million people died due to COVID. He lied directly to the American people about COVID, resulting in the economy collapsing and a million Americans no longer being with us. I could go on. And then you add to that, Michael, the fact that he had no political experience going into the presidency. He was just a television celebrity. First job in politics was President of the United States. Kamala Harris has been a prosecutor. She's been a DA. She's been Attorney General of the entire state of California. She's been a United States Senator and Vice President. And yet you have people saying, I don't know, is she ready for this? I need to hear more specifics. I need to hear more about her program, as if they've ever heard of any of the specifics that presidential candidates are running on. With George W. Bush, it was, I want to have a beer with him. No one asked. What do you all make of the fact that she's gotten this far and is still essentially in a statistical tie with someone that had to explain that he's not a Nazi?
Yeah, well, I'll say a couple of things to that. Number one, we've always expected this to be a very close and tight race, as all modern presidential campaigns are. This is a margin of error race for us. That means it's going to come down to margin of effort. It's why when we leave here, the vice president is going to crisscross the battleground states, and our organizers are going to be knocking on doors. We knocked on nearly 3 million doors last week. That work is going to continue throughout the rest of this week. As it relates to undecided voters, right? These are the people largely who have still not yet voted during the early vote period. And for them, in an increasingly fragmented and fractured media environment, as you all were discussing, it is about these moments that break through. I do think that Madison Square Garden, unfortunately for Donald Trump, did in fact break through. It was supposed to be his closing argument. I'm not quite sure the 500,000 Puerto Ricans in the state of Pennsylvania agreed with what was said at his closing argument. I think tonight you're going to see something that's fundamentally different, right? It's going to be not about hatred, not about division, because what you also did not hear at Madison Square Garden was a single solution for how to improve the lives of the American people. That's exactly what you're going to hear tonight from the Vice President. She's going to go in depth about the work that she is going to do every single day on behalf of the American people. She's going to let people know that it is possible to have leadership that sees you, that thinks about you, that understands your lived experience in 21st century America, and is going to work their ass off every single day to improve your lives. That's what tonight is about, and that's what we're going to take on the road for the next week of this campaign.
Michael Tyler, Communications Director for the Harris Walz campaign. Thank you very much, sir.